Right, I've gone a bit old school with some paper notes here, so just bear with me if there's a bit of rustling here and there. So good afternoon. As Mia said, I'm Danielle Bowler, and I'm presenting today about the City of Joondalup's pathogen management, particularly about our development and implementation of a pathogen management plan. Firstly, I'd just like to thank South Coast NRM and the DIVAT working group for inviting me to speak about our approach to pathogen management. I was telling a colleague of mine that I was giving a presentation about pathogens. They said, "Oh, what are you going to do as an icebreaker?" I said, "Well, I don't really have an icebreaker. Everyone just gets up and they kind of give their presentation." And I was like, well, maybe I could give like a pathogen rap or do some interpretive dance about pathogens. But luckily for you guys, I don't really have any rapping or dancing skills, so you're not going to be inflicted with that today. So my presentation is going to cover a bit of background information about the City of Joondalup, our situation before we had a pathogen management plan, the development of our first pathogen management plan, some information about our pathogen mapping and sampling program, and then I'll talk about the development of our current pathogen management plan. So the City of Joondalup, the natural environment is quite unique. The city is located about 30 kilometres north of the Perth CBD. We've got a population of about 160,000 residents. We cover an area of 99 kilometres squared, which includes 17 kilometres of coastline all the way from Marmion up to Burns Beach. We've got about 1,400 hectares of natural areas within the city, and the city itself manages about 500 of those. We manage 100 natural area reserves and also 260 parks and public open spaces, and a lot of them contain remnant native vegetation. We also have the Yellowgonga Regional Park located within the City of Joondalup, which is a linear chain of wetlands about 13 kilometres long, including Lake Joondalup and Lake Goolalal. We've got 8 bush forever sites, about 6 priority flora species and 30 fauna species of conservation significance. And we've got 2 federally protected threatened ecological communities within the city. We've got the endangered Banksia woodlands of the Swan Coastal Plain and the critically endangered Chewett woodlands and forests of the Swan Coastal Plain. We've got a number of conservation significant fauna, including the federally protected endangered Carnaby's black cockatoo and the vulnerable forest red-tailed black cockatoo. We've also got a good population of quenda, particularly within our feral-proof fenced area at Craigie Bushland. We take a bit of a holistic approach to environmental management as displayed in our strategic environmental framework. Oops, sorry. And we've got our strategic community plan, sits right at the top. Underneath that is our environment plan, followed by some issue-specific plans. And underneath our biodiversity action plan sits plans like the pathogen management plan and also site-specific natural area management plans. So before we had a pathogen management plan, we had a bit of an ad hoc approach to pathogen management in the city, which was quite reactive. We had a few locations where we had identified Phytophthora and Armillaria, but we didn't really know about the full extent of pathogens within the city, so it was hard to provide a coordinated approach to pathogen management. We also had some gaps, like we didn't have any internal pathogen management guidelines for staff, and there was a need for community and staff education regarding pathogen management. To address these gaps, we developed our first pathogen management plan in 2013. And a key aim of this plan was to identify areas of high risk where management actions should be prioritised to minimise the spread of pathogens. It was quite expensive to do site investigations and on-ground sampling, so we decided it'd be best to prioritise the areas for sampling. And we used a holistic risk analysis approach, which included all parks and natural areas in the city rather than doing it on a site-by-site basis. We engaged Arbor Carbon to do a desktop risk analysis for us to determine the level of risk for plant pathogens being introduced and spread within the vegetated areas within the city. And this resulted in a prioritised list of sites which we used for on-ground sampling. Some of the Key achievements of the Pathogen Management Plan. Sorry, one of the cons of using paper notes is getting a little bit muddled. Some of our key achievements were the implementation of a pathogen hygiene awareness campaign. So we distributed information via our website and brochures and presented at community events. We also did a pathogen hygiene training session for the city's natural areas friends groups. And this also focused on 9 boot cleaning stations that we had installed in 2 of our major conservation areas, which before that date didn't have any pathogens identified because we wanted to protect those areas. And we conduct annual Adopt a Bushland and Adopt a Coastline programs for primary school students to raise the awareness of bushland conservation values and also encourage pathogen hygiene. We developed a bushland management manual for city staff working within the city's natural areas and parks. This included pathogen and weed hygiene guidelines, a pathogen identification checklist, nursery hygiene guidelines, and also guidelines for the purchasing of landscaping supplies. So before we developed these guidelines, we used to just use free green waste, and after the guidelines were developed, we now purchase certified pathogen-free mulch for all areas within the city. So that was a big achievement for us. We have had to date 145 staff from inside the office and the outdoor staff undertake the green card training. And probably our biggest achievement from the plan is the city's pathogen mapping and sampling program. This was also conducted by Arbor Carbon in 114 of our natural areas and parks between 2014 and 2018. So to do the program, we acquired high-resolution multispectral airborne imagery of the city every 2 years, and the imagery was analysed to establish change in vegetation vigour. So you can see the map on this slide is of craggy bushland, and it shows the vegetation condition change between 2015 and 2019. The red areas indicate a decrease in vegetation vigour, and the blue areas indicate an increase in vegetation vigour. So having this mapping enabled us to target on-ground sampling in areas that were showing vegetation decline. This is a good example of scientific research informing on-ground pathogen management. The original intent of the pathogen mapping and sampling program was to see if we had Phytophthora or Armillaria in any of our parks and natural areas. And we found a whole bunch of things that we didn't know that we had. A big variety of Phytophthora, a lot of Pythiums, heaps of other weaker pathogens, and Armillaria as well. And I feel like if there was a competition for local governments who has the most identified pathogens, that we might actually win that competition, but I haven't heard of one yet. So the pathogen mapping and sampling program resulted in 39 sites having confirmed pathogens, 13 sites with suspected pathogens, and we uploaded pathogen spatial data to our internal GIS system so that staff could see where pathogens have been identified or were suspected. And with TLO's help, we also added it to DIDMs, which helped community members and external agencies to also know where pathogens had been identified within the city. And this enabled us to focus our pathogen hygiene processes on areas that were infested. We then developed our current pathogen management plan in 2018 with the objective to minimise the introduction or spread of key pathogens and protect the biodiversity values within the city. The pathogen management plan outlines key activities which might increase the risk of introducing or spreading pathogens, the current controls and management actions that we could take. It also identifies reserves of high conservation value that are threatened by pathogens and where we should prioritise our management actions, and outlines an education program to raise the awareness of pathogens within the organisation and the community. Probably the key focus of this plan is the pathogen treatment program. So we've done a whole bunch of sampling and figured out a lot of our problem areas, and we felt like now it's time to move forward and actually start implementing treatment. So we prioritised 32 city parks and natural areas and commenced treatment in 2018 focusing on areas with Phytophthora and Pythium. We used phosphite. We did spraying and injections, including a spray buffer zone of 25 metres. And we uploaded the spatial data regarding the treatment points and the areas to GIS. And we are hoping to implement this treatment program every 3 years and also incorporate pathogen interpretation, mapping and sampling at the same time. So some of the other actions from the Pathogen Management Plan are liaising with neighbouring local government areas like the City of Wanneroo and the City of Stirling to share information and encourage collaborative pathogen management practices. And we've kind of extended that, so we're liaising with other local governments within the Perth metro area as well, because there's a lot of good stuff going on out there. We distributed pathogen hygiene kits to all of our friends groups. We've developed some interpretive signage for our bushland areas, including ways to protect and care for the bushland. And we've started undertaking works in natural area drainage sites to improve and control stormwater drainage runoff into the bushland. We've also been planting trees in mulched areas rather than turf to suppress armillaria and reduce the need for irrigation. Just a brief case study is we recently did a playground upgrade in a park in Mullaloo, which was 2 hectares in size, and the park had previously had Pythium identified. So some of the pathogen hygiene practices that the contractors were required to undertake were, we provided them with our pathogen hygiene protocols and a site access map to restrict movement on site. We retained the new playground in the same location as the old one to minimise soil disturbance. We had a vehicle washdown bay set up on site. We fenced off a construction area for stockpiling and truck movement, and also used bunting to create a work exclusion zone around the pathogen infested area. And we retained existing infrastructure where possible, like a limestone wall around the playground. So this upgrade was a good learning experience regarding incorporating pathogen hygiene requirements into on-ground works. And moving forwards, we're going to be applying the precautionary principle and incorporating strict pathogen hygiene protocols into all on-ground works that have soil disturbance. So that was a big win for us. The ways that we monitor the implementation of our pathogen management plan is we have natural area KPIs for our major conservation areas. Things like we assess the overall change in vegetation vigour every 2 years. We assess canopy cover every 2 years. We use vegetation condition assessments to assess the vegetation condition per area every 5 years. And we also conduct annual reviews and report against the pathogen management plan to track the progress. So that's pretty much it from me. I hope that you guys found it useful, and feel free to contact me if you have any queries or if there's any questions now.
Any questions to Danielle? On Phil.
Danielle, sort of what actually drove that turnaround, like going from where to go with this sort of program? Like, how do you get it up and running?
Yeah, we were quite lucky. We had some pretty environmental counsellors on board who were very passionate and part of natural area friends groups as well. So I think it might have actually been driven from council. It was before my time, but we had to run it through council, do council reports, and they were very supportive of us going down this path. So yeah, it definitely helped having counsellors that really cared about the environment.
Okay. One quick one from Jeremy.
Just quickly, how closely did your aerials, your spectral imaging, correspond when you went out on site and sampled? Were the areas of vegetation defined where you had your positives?
It is a good question. Arbor Carbon did the imagery and the on-ground sampling for us, and I haven't actually asked that question whether the two match up and whether it's really worthwhile, so I'll investigate that. Thanks.